Talking financial organization and a professional practice does not have to be boring. Are you ready for a few money in, money out ideas? It's Susan Gunn coming directly to your head to make you think. Can you handle the truth? Because she is known for being energetic, laughs a lot, and gives honest, sometimes direct, but always practical advice. It's time now for Money In, Money Out.
Welcome to Money In, Money Out's final episode of 2020. Thank goodness this year is coming to a close. Oh my gosh, what a year. And to help us close out this year, to use up to this point as an accounting term, close out the year. Did you catch that?
Love it.
Kate Willeford of Willeford CPA Group joins us at the table. She started with us in March and she is finishing the year strong with us here. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Susan. It's great to be with you. And I feel like we should already be toasting to bringing in 2021.
No, you know what I've been telling everybody? Please eat a double helping of black-eyed peas.
Yes.
New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Or heck, just start early. Start on Christmas Day.
Well, and don't forget the collards, because that represents more money in 2021.
Oh, there you go. Collards. Oh, and I like collard greens. Oh my gosh. So what you don't know is that Kate and I have already been talking almost an hour because, we do that. And it's amazing. Everything that's happened this year. Let's just do a really brief recap. March, we shut down. Actually, let's go back. January was awesome.
That's
February
right.
was awesome, wasn't it? February was great. We were starting to hear about this virus. Chicago Midwinter happened. All my colleagues that were speakers were kind of going, is this going to be a bad thing? How's it going to work out? And then March happened. I started this podcast March 14th with Kate.
That's right.
Is the sky really falling? Remember? Boy, little did we know on March 14th, the sky really was following.
Well, we had no idea back then how long it was going to last.
Oh, gosh. And it was quickly followed by the coronavirus Twilight Zone episode. That was actually one of my favorite ones, the Twilight Zone. I was like, because, I got to tell you, even sometimes now, doesn't it feel like it's still so surreal?
It really is. That's a great way to describe it.
This year has felt like 5 years. In fact, this time last year, I was getting ready to go to the UK for my second oldest goddaughter's wedding. That was all I was really thinking about.
Wow. Our habits have completely changed.
Yeah.
And even just socially, how often we're allowed to see each other, and all of the Zoom calls, that has taken on a whole new meaning. So even in dentistry, a lot of times now when you're just going to have a regular phone call with each other, people assume now it's a Zoom video call. So even that habit has changed.
Zoom is a household word now, right? Kind of like Google.
Yes.
You Google something, you Zoom. We're going to Zoom. Yeah. Yeah. We had so many Zoom happy hours. And now everybody's talking about Zooming for Christmas, which is just heart-rendering. But, then we had all the government funding programs that you and I were really tried to figure out, as well as thousands of other people. The PPP, the EIDL, the CARES. We've had staggered reopenings. Most dentist practices got back to full strength and are now starting to slow down. And our COVID cases, wow. I don't know about you guys, but here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we are maxed out on our hospital beds again. And I know more people now in the last 2 months that have been sick, hospitalized, and have passed away from COVID or COVID complications.
Well, it was very exciting to see the vaccines being shipped starting yesterday morning. So that's going to be
today. The New York gal in New York City got it. I saw
the first nurse to get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. My granddaddy is 99. He's been doing great in his nursing home. And I really can't wait for him to be one of the first ones to be able to get it, because he has excellent health, and he really wants to be able to see everyone again. Luckily, he has figured out Zoom. So we do Zoom video calls with him
Oh,
So I
wow.
think it's going to make such a big difference to be able to spend time together in person again.
Oh, yeah. To get hugs or to
Yeah.
give hugs. That'd be
But,
the best.
Susan, I also have to share that we have been excited about how dentistry has rebounded during this period of time because so many dentists have been focused on their reduction in collections. And that has happened, about 18% on average reduction we've seen. But what was an interesting surprise was that most dental practices saved far more in overhead expenses than the reduced collections. So we've actually seen net income increasing at least 2 to 4% for most practices, and some even higher than that. So although we did see a reduction in October, we're now starting to still hear that in December, there are not very many holes in the schedule. In most of the states I've been talking to, they're not seeing very many cancellations, even due to concerns over the increase in COVID numbers. So we've actually been excited to see that dentistry has started to rebound faster than we had anticipated, and then even the ADA anticipated earlier this year.
Wow, that's great. I mean, that really does go to show, though, that we have to think worst case scenario to plan and to get our ducks all in a row, right?
Mhm.
And then
Yep.
if it doesn't happen, it's okay. But if you don't plan for it, then you're
Yep.
really behind. But those people that have planned for it and they've gotten their things together, and hopefully, you and I will both laugh at this one. Hopefully, they would know if they have an increase in their net income.
Yeah.
That
And
would be
hopefully they'll
awesome.
hold on to some of that cash because the businesses that were able to survive this closure the best were those who had already saved a lot of money. And I know that sounds really basic, but I think it's important for quality of life reasons and for
Yeah.
stress to be in that situation. Some of my clients were actually able to call me and say, I've saved enough money that now that I'm required to be closed, I'm taking my kids to the lake for 6 weeks and I'm not going to read anything about the crisis. I'm just going to enjoy my time off. And that's the position you want to be in because business interruptions can happen so easily. I mean,
Yeah.
just like I do, that even if you lose that key front desk person, that can change your cash flow, or if you lose a key hygienist. So, this was an extreme set of circumstances of a reduction in cash flow, but it's very easy to have interruptions where you need to have had a few weeks worth of income saved so that you don't have to pull out your credit card or go ask for another line of credit. So I think right now it's going to be key to really have that financial flexibility, hold on to your extra cash, and be prepared to make it through this winter season. And then decide now, do you truly have extra cash? And if so, is it appropriate to pay down some debt or pay yourself more? But, Susan, you've probably seen this as you're looking at numbers that right now, a lot of our dentists have a lot of extra cash in their bank accounts. So they
Yeah.
have these inflated bank accounts, but it's not because of earned income
Right.
necessarily. In a lot of those cases, it's because they received loan money and that doesn't increase their equity in their business. So that's not money sitting there to be paid out in bonuses. That's money that needs to be saved to have financial freedom over the next few months.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I will tell you, I am a Susie Orman person on making cash flow king
Yeah.
and making sure that we've got an adequate savings and that we have really prepared. I mean, we had a little bit of a heads up of this happening, and as through the year, hopefully you've been paying more attention to your bottom line. But you know the thing about it is that I've been talking about crisis planning and knowing how to handle your finances in a crisis ever since the tornado ripped through
Mm,
the Omni Hotel in downtown Atlanta.
I remember
And
that.
then we had a tornado. We didn't talk about this in our pre-time, less than a mile away a few weeks ago from my house.
Hmm.
And so all those, and here it is, and no kidding, it hit the food bank. Really?
Wow.
Really. So
Hmm.
it took off part of the roof and the compressor and everything off the food bank, but they'll get back up and going here pretty quickly. In fact, they may already be this week, but that was just, an unplanned crisis.
Hmm.
But we have to have the funds to be able to take care of things like that when they do happen.
That's right. And I think that just means being more careful about spending. And we have found that more people are saving a higher dollar amount this year than they have in prior years. And I think a lot of people had gotten used to spending 110% of what they make because they can go use their credit cards or they can go ask for loans. But the more cautious you can be about your spending to then have the freedom to be able to work one day because you choose to, but not because you financially have to,
Right.
is the ideal way to be living your life.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, let's talk a little bit about the PPPs and the idols. I really meant to over the weekend. I finally got the notice from my bank that because they've been organized, if you've not gotten anything from your bank about the forgiveness portion of the PPP loan, then you will stay in contact with a commercial lender or your contact with that bank to make sure that you get it. But and I failed to do it. But I know that there is a quick form that you can do, and that a lot of people would qualify for that quick form.
That's right. There is an easy form that you can use. And if you have a loan of $50,000 or less, then it's a very quick form to fill out. There's still the potential that Congress will forgive the loans of possibly up to $150,000 or less so that you would have much less paperwork to fill out. So I'm still advising that you not file for the PPP loan forgiveness unless you're about to sell your practice, or if you received one and you're about to buy another practice, that could be another potential. But if you have a transition that will be happening in the next 9 months, then I do recommend that you file now. If you don't, then you might as well use some of this 10-month period of time that you have to, first of all, wait till your bank is even accepting the applications. We have a lot of very large lenders
Right.
that are still not accepting applications. And just to save yourself some time and stress. Sure, you could go ahead and fill it out if you've gotten an $80,000 loan or something, and hopefully you're able to show that you spent it all on payroll. So that will keep your form filing a little bit simpler and a little bit faster. I would say overall, people tell me it takes about 45 minutes to an hour to fill out the paperwork. Worst case scenario, you've wasted 45 minutes or an hour of your time, if you're anxious to get it over with, and then it turned out your loan would have been automatically forgiven later, and that's fine too. But it's not something that you need to stress over to fill out right away unless you're selling your practice. That is the scenario under which you definitely need to fill this out, because that between the banks and the SBA, this is allowed to take 6 months for them to forgive it. Now we're seeing forgiveness already happening much faster, but they do have that allotted time between the two of them to go through this process. And if you are selling your practice and your loan has not been forgiven yet, what we're finding the banks doing is that they're creating an escrow account. So when you sell, they're going to hold your PPP loan money in an escrow account, and you won't receive that part of the proceeds until the bank has received the full forgiveness from the SBA.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, right now what we're seeing is that there's a lot of owner financing happening with a portion of the practice sales. And if you're selling to one of the larger groups, oftentimes there's a holdback. So what can happen here is you could be selling your practice and not receiving much cash up front. So then if your PPP loan is being kept in escrow, you may be walking away with not much cash at all at closing. So just be prepared for that. And that's why it would be wise to go ahead and file for that forgiveness.
Hmm.
One of the questions that I have been getting a lot is the EIDL grant portion of the PPP. So what really happens with the PPP is that you are going to have your loan forgiven if you met all of the regulations, except for the portion that you received as the EIDL grant. That portion you do owe, because that grant can't count twice as free money. So in essence, the way the SBA looked at it was as if the EIDL grant was an advance against that PPP money. So do not be surprised that you need to pay back whatever that EIDL grant dollar amount was for you, which for most people was $10,000. That's the portion that you do pay back out of the PPP money.
Okay. That was the one that was $1,000 per employee type thing.
That's right.
Right.
And there
Right.
were some people that received even more than that if they filed at the very beginning before the SBA changed the rules again.
Which Was one of the funny things about us doing the podcast in the very beginning was there was that one podcast that we did. I think it was like the second or the third one. And I'll be dang, we talked for like an hour and a half before we ever
That's
recorded
right.
it. And then we got off the podcast, and before I could even submit it to my podcast guy at the time, it changed. All the rules changed. And we were like, are you kidding? I went
Yeah.
ahead and posted it. It was with the foreword of all this information could change at any time. It was very fluid.
Mhm.
And you know what? I guess I would still say that. It's still so fluid because there are so many things that we wanted to talk about today that are still fluid that they could
It's
change.
true. You know, in fact, one of the things we're still waiting on is whether or not the expenses that you paid with the PPP money will be tax deductible this year. You know, it's not unusual for Congress or the IRS to make a tax law change in January and it would be retroactive back to the prior year. And I think that's what we may find this time. And this issue is unusual because what in essence had happened was Congress created the PPP program, they gave out the money, and then the IRS actually responded as they should have according to current tax laws. They said, that's fine, you can receive the PPP money and that will not be taxable to you, but you cannot take a tax deduction for the expenses you pay with that money. And that does follow standard tax law. Congress, of course, immediately said that was not their intention. Congress just didn't think through the details of how the tax law works. And they were very clear to say we intended to give away the money and also allow the expenses. But in order for that to happen, we need Congress or the IRS to reverse that IRS stance. I do highly anticipate that is possible. And that is part of the conversation they're having right now with this next stimulus act. I talked to one of the ADA legislators about a week ago, and she said that this is part of the conversation now. They are looking at making those expenses tax deductible. But, you know, that's really going to increase your net taxable income if you are not allowed to take those
Yeah.
expenses. And be aware that is the current tax law that they are not deductible.
Yeah. So let's just play this in practicality. If you got a $10,000 loan and all of that $10,000 was used on payroll, including net income as well as taxes and everything
Mm-hmm.
that you pay with the payroll, then you do not get to count the tax portion of that as a deduction or the gross taxes as a part of the deduction
That's
because
right.
it was a gift. And so if Congress goes back and they say, hey, we're going to change the IRS rules and we're going to allow this, then really you didn't get just a $10,000 grant. You got like a $13,000 or a $14,000
Mm-hmm.
grant. I mean, really,
That's
that's what
right.
it increases the amount of money. I could see that being part of the stimulus. That would make
Mm-hmm.
sense, right?
Yeah, I think it really would make sense. So I think we'll probably see that change. One of the changes I think we probably won't see is that there was another round of funding that was the HHS Relief Fund. That money is supposed to be taxable to you when you received it. And that is something that has been discussed as potentially making that non taxable, but I don't expect to see that change. I think that probably will remain taxable. And in that case, you are allowed to then take the tax deductions for what you spent the money on. But if you are receiving that money, and we're still waiting for people to hear back on round 3, by the way, as to how much funding they might receive, then I would assume that that would be taxable when you receive it.
I think it would be interesting to see further stimulus. I know that so many of the restaurants, man, they are hurting. And a lot of people, I mean, we're not out as much, so
Mm-hmm.
we don't naturally eat out as much, right?
That's right.
So
And I
I
think that's why we're going to start to see that they will allow these expenses to be deductible because dentistry, like I say, has actually rebounded very well. So it is returning to where it was faster than we were anticipating. But other industries have not been in that scenario. The travel industry, the restaurant industry, as you mentioned. And so when Congress is making these decisions and the IRS, they're having to look out for all businesses and all industries. So that's why I think we're going to see some improvement. I think there'll probably be another round of PPP funding that will come out. The rumors that I'm hearing right now, though, is that you might need to have a 50% reduction in income to qualify. For example, right now there's a California credit that we've been looking at with our clients. And to meet that, you had to have a 50% decrease in your collections. But that was looking at second quarter compared to second quarter of last year. In this case, with new PPP funding, we're not sure at what time frame they're going to use for this reduction in income. So we don't know if they're going to look at the entire year of 2020, if they're going to look at maybe just the end of second quarter. So we'll have to see how they're going to qualify this, but there's the potential that some practices may not meet the new level of funding.
Right. Well, and if they look at the whole year, then I would expect that funding wouldn't be made available to begin with until the end of February.
Mm-hmm.
Because they gotta have the ability to get their books up to date. So
right.
All that to say, you guys need to keep your accounting up to date. All of you that have been dragging your feet and downloading the transactions from the credit card company in your bank need to start doing that. I'll get that as a little pinprick for some of you that I know that listen. You need to get it together.
Well, and this year is the right year to also clean up your accounts. We oftentimes find people transferring money between personal and business, or they'll use a personal credit card for business expenses, those kinds of things. This is the year to stop those bad habits and make sure that you're spending money in the correct entity using the entity credit card and keep those accounts really clean. One reason is because of bank financing. Bank financing has changed dramatically this year. They're being much more cautious than before. They're wanting very clean records. They're asking more detailed questions and their due diligence than they ever have been. So you don't want to have to show all of your personal credit card statements, for example, to be able to prove which portion of that was for business related expenses. And the other reason I would do it is for potential transition reasons. We actually do have a lot of dentists who have been working through selling their practices right now. And let's suppose something happens where you decide maybe just a few months from now that you decide it's time to sell. And if you want to sell, you're going to find that buyers are being much more specific in their due diligence. So again, having to prove the flow of money, and you really want to be able to show that your dental practice is independent, it's financially stable, and that means having the cleanest records possible.
Well, and not to bring the morbidity factor back in, but we are in the middle of a pandemic and things happen. I mean, it's not like you would come down with a fever and you'd go, wait, I need to get my QuickBooks up to date, or I need to make sure that everything is correct, or I've got my will done. I mean, I've talked to so many people and they've said, you'd be surprised how many people haven't gotten a current will. And it's like, okay, you guys, I mean, you don't always have a head up that something's going to happen.
Right.
Which is, in fact, I think on one of the podcasts, I talked about a client that was in the Northeast, and he was an amazing guy. And he'd call me every fall and give me a hard time about his silly little New England Patriots. I don't know. He wasn't around for Ballgate, but I really missed him. He'd always give me a hard time about the Cowboys, but he didn't wake up one morning. My friend Sally McKenzie.
That's right.
Passed away September 1st. Still miss her. Thought about her a gazillion times. And, she had all of her stuff together and all her ducks in a row to really help her brother Tom. You do that because you love the people who might have to clean up the mess.
Yeah. Well, the unexpected can happen, or it could just also be a situation where you realize medically that it's time for you to sell. And I've had some of those cases happen too, where just the stress of everything happening with the COVID situation combined with the way they were already starting to feel about selling at some point in the next year or two has just caused them to want to move up the sale date. And so that means now you've got less time to be prepared. So the cleaner the records can be, the easier it is to get the right sales price. Because remember, you still want to sell for the highest dollar amount you possibly can, and be able to get the financing quickly. Because if you can avoid having to offer some owner financing, that would be ideal. And like I mentioned earlier, we're seeing that as a component of sales more than we had been in the last few years.
Well, and if you need help, if you're listening and you need help with your QuickBooks, I do have an extreme makeover package that organizes your QuickBooks to be a practice management chart of accounts, which is very understandable. You will know exactly where your expenses are, what area your expenses are, what your income is. And it really is a back-to-back accountability between the practice software and QuickBooks. I developed it also to protect your practice so that you know where you might be short funds.
Yeah.
Let's just put it that way, and protect it against potential embezzlement. But I love taking a really messy QuickBooks and making it clean. You know, a lot of times our dentists always talk about how they see this person's mouth. And in fact, oh my gosh, really funny conversation I had. I said had to get a blood draw, and I was in there getting the blood draw, and
Uh-huh.
I said, I work with dentists, and they always look at people's mouths and they say, oh, I could fix those teeth. I can't tell you how many times I've been watching a British show or something. They go,
Right.
hey, I could fix those teeth. And so I looked at the phlebotomist and I said, do you look at people's veins the same way? And she busted out laughing. She goes, I've never had anybody ask me that question, but yes, I do. I was watching TV the other day and saw this guy's vein popping out on his neck and went, wow, look at that vein. That's really scary, but okay. But anyways, that was a complete aside. I look at QuickBooks the same way. I see a sloppy, really disorganized QuickBooks, and I'm so excited to clean that up so that you can understand your reports. That's the best part of it.
Well, and to me, a lot of it comes back to quality of life, Susan,
Yeah.
because you want to be able to look at your overhead very quickly within 5 minutes, know exactly what your overhead is in a few key meaningful categories. And if you are in line with what your goals were, then you can stop looking at it and go enjoy time with your family, go enjoy a hobby, spend less time stressing over the numbers. And I find
Right.
that if you have clean files to be able to look at and a clean set of financials, then you can create that flexibility for yourself and not have to stress over the numbers because you know you're doing okay.
Right. And one of the best parts of the Extreme Makeover, I think, is because not only is it organized, but I memorize reports for them to review. And so they can click on the buttons. And I say all the time, really, the hardest software in the practice that they're using is
Yeah,
not QuickBooks. It's the practice management
that's
software.
right.
QuickBooks is just a really small 15% of the accounting that's done in the practice.
Yep.
It really takes maybe 2 hours a week, and that includes payroll.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, with downloading, I don't know what you've been telling people. I've been telling them to put everything on the credit card. It makes it so much
Mm-hmm.
easier.
It
Then
does.
download those transactions, and then you pay the credit card.
Mm-hmm.
That's
That's
all you
right.
really have to do.
It saves a lot of time. Plus, you're usually getting points or some type of
Yeah.
reward off of using the credit card. Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's a way to do that. Do not go into the new year with a horrible file, or if you do have to go into the new year, don't wait too long. Then you'll know where you've been spending your stuff and
Well, and
where it's
speaking
coming in.
of the new year and QuickBooks also, one thing that I would point out is payroll. That right now I still
Yes.
find payroll companies to be a huge value, especially in a year like this where the W-2 forms have changed, the requirements have changed for payroll tax credits and how you're tracking that across multiple employees and multiple pay periods. That if anything, now would be a great time to consider a payroll company for January so that you can take all of that stress off of yourself as well. Because reputable payroll companies are excellent at what they do. It's very inexpensive. And the burden is on them to reply to incorrect tax notices for you. And we see a lot of those. And the burden is on them to make the tax payments for you. So they make the tax deposit. So it's another big stressor off of your mind so that you don't have to think about it. I just believe in outsourcing the pieces of your business that you know you can outsource so that then you're spending your time on the pieces that you can't or the things that you really enjoy, or again, taking some downtime, especially after this year, we've realized how important having downtime is.
Yeah, you and I both can say that. We both have enjoyed
Yes.
and recognized how much we need it. When you hit the wall after working, I know Kate had worked for many, many months, 7 days a week,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes a toll. It takes
Yeah.
a toll. So let's talk about that for a second, because you were telling me about the payroll companies. You can actually pay your 1099 employees, like your associates and your labs, through the payroll companies.
That's right.
And that they will want to consider that this year, because one of the forms that changed that really made me spin my head like The Exorcist was the change in the NEC and the MISC
Mm-hmm.
1099 forms. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, yes. So we have changes in the W-2 forms, and we also have changes in the 1099 forms. So in the past, you primarily were filing 1099s using a 1099 MIS form, MISC. They've now added a new form. So this is going to be the 1099 NEC for non-employment compensation. So you'll have the NEC and the MISC. You'll also still have the interest one if you were paying that as well. And we're going to have separate 1096 forms that go with all of this. You know, what I think is really going on here is I feel like the IRS is wanting to be able to check people's income figures sooner than ever before when they're filing their tax returns, because they've also moved up the filing deadlines for these. So this is again where a payroll company can really simplify your life. And here's the way that it could work with 1099s. You can set up your 1099 vendors in your payroll. So think of, let's say, people that you pay for janitorial services or the attorneys that you pay or something. You can pay them through payroll on the separate 1099 screen every time you're running pay for other employees, or once a month, however often you want to do it. And then the payroll company is tracking that figure. So by year end, they will create the 1099 for that person and use the correct form now that we have all new forms for that. Another way you could do it, let's say that you have a payroll company, but you weren't paying your 1099s that way during the year. At this point in the year, you're now able to report to the payroll company that total dollar amount for that vendor for the year. And then you can include that on this 1099 and have the payroll company still run the 1099 for you. It's similar to you needing to report the shareholder insurance. If you're a 2% shareholder or more, you're having to report that insurance figure to them for the whole year by year end to make sure it's on your owner W-2. This is a similar concept where you can report all of the 1099 income. I'll tell you, Susan, I'll take the mystery out of this. It's a lot less expensive to have your payroll company run that 1099 than it is to have your CPA firm run those 1099s for you.
Yeah.
And it certainly is a lot stressful than you trying to figure out all these new forms and deadlines in QuickBooks to file your own 1099s.
Okay, so let me just tell you about that, because even I had to figure out those forms. And when I saw the NEC, I was like, huh? What the heck? And I did
Yeah.
research and I'm looking at it and I went, oh my gosh. And if it makes my head spin, I know it's going to make their head spin. I literally had to get on the phone and go, what is this? I called my CPA and said,
Yeah.
what is this? And
Well,
what
because
goes where?
it's confusing, and now we're having to decide, well, which form do you use now for the associate? Which form do you use if you're paying a lab? Which one are you using for an attorney? They've changed all those rules. So there are a lot of details to know about the 1099s.
So just to re-clarify, which form is used for what?
So my current interpretation of this is that the 1099 NEC, which is non-employment compensation, that will in essence replace most of what you would have put on the 1099 MISC or miscellaneous. So associates would be paid on the 1099 NEC, or that's where their pay would be reported. You know, janitorial services would be on the NEC. If you're paying a lab who is unincorporated, that would be on the MISC, and attorneys will be on the MISC. And the deadline for these, as I mentioned earlier, I alluded to the fact that the deadlines have been moved up. So the deadline is actually January 31st. However, that falls on a weekend. So now that's February 1st for this next year. So the deadline for the NEC and the MISC is now for not only the recipient to receive it by February 1st, but also it needs to be electronically filed by then. And that's a new deadline that was not required in the past. Now, for the MISC form, you actually have until February 15th to electronically file that one. Sorry, electronically file that one until March 31st. The recipient gets it by February 15th on that particular form if you're using box 8 or 10. So as I say, there are a lot of details here to be aware of as you're filling out these forms. But if you can use your payroll company for it, that's what I would do, because most of the times I find most offices have maybe only 5 or 6 1099s that need to be filed. You can look in your QuickBooks to see how much you paid that vendor for the entire year. Just report it to the payroll company and have them file the 1099 for you using these new rules, and the burden will be on them to make sure they're using the right forms for that.
So, and my thought would be to do that sooner than later in January because of the deadline that you mentioned. The NEC deadline for electronic filing is February 1st. And so if the electronic filing deadline is February 1st, you really don't have a buffer, if you will,
Right.
that the person could come back and say, hey, that amount wasn't right. Or it needed to be changed, because that's one of the reasons we had the buffer in February, was for them to come back and say, hey, this isn't right,
Yep.
or should you change it now? And it could be that you designated that person in your QuickBooks to be a different account, or maybe you might have multiple names for that person, and so you didn't get all the funding, the money that you paid them in that one area. So it might need to be changed. So you want to be sure to get your at least look at it or get the person the information at the beginning of January, not at the end. Don't wait till the last minute. Not this year. Do not wait to the last minute.
That's right. And then if you're going to use a payroll company for it, I would report that to them before December 31st, because this is another amazing thing about payroll companies is they're running your W-2s the first week of January. They're very fast at getting the W-2s run. They're wanting to run those 1099s at the same time, and you want to avoid any extra fees. So you want to report your shareholder insurance amounts, your car mileage amounts if you have a leased auto through the practice, and your 1099 figures by December 31st, so that when they're running those W-2s and 1099s for you at the very beginning of January, they will be correct the first time around.
Wow, that's a really good point. So the end of December.
Yes.
Get it in. Get it in. Yeah, you and I talked a little bit before we started recording about why they're doing some of this, and you kind of touched on it in a second, but I wanted to go back there. I think that they're doing that so that they can track better who's being paid what, and to make sure that those that are receiving that amount of money are truly counting everything that's coming their way as far as income. And then they're not trying to do anything unethical, doing it under the table, or
Yeah.
trying to, let's just call it what it is, defraud the IRS. So I did the podcast. This last podcast was about all the SBA EIDL and PPP fraud that's hitting the headlines now.
Right.
And so if listeners have not heard that, you will want to go back and listen to it, because it's happening. In several of those cases that I talked about, they were found out because the IRS actually went back and found out the company that they said existed, and the employees, some of them put 100 employees, over 100 employees, did not exist. The employees didn't
Yeah.
exist. And they got paid huge amounts of money. It wasn't the fact that he bought the Lamborghini. It was the fact that the company didn't exist.
Right.
One is the other, but they do have those checks and balances in pay, especially for electronics now.
That's right.
You can't file something, just to let you know. I mean, a lot of the listeners don't know this, but you can't file something on a federal level that it doesn't send that information to the state level, and vice versa. And so that you do not lie on the forms. I just cannot even, this is not the year to do that. There's never the year to do that. But please be honest when you're filling out these forms. If there is just like what Kate said, if there is a 50%, you have to show that your business has been reduced 50%. Whatever those qualifications are, do not lie just to get the money, because the outcome may not be what you want. And as in all those situations that I talked about in my podcast the last time, they didn't get to enjoy that money very long before they were caught and thrown into jail.
That's right.
It's like, it's not worth it. It's really not. It's just like my embezzlers.
Yeah.
It's not worth it. They think they're never going to get caught.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they do, they're pissed.
Yeah.
Because they got caught.
Yeah. Getting overly greedy is sometimes what really stands out to the IRS. That's for sure.
And to everyone else.
Yes.
And everyone else. Well, what else can we talk about that they need to be aware of? It's the end of the year. They've got their finances somewhat together. They need to download. I will tell you again, I can't emphasize timing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this is the year to drag your feet.
No,
Lots of people wait till February to get their stuff together.
right.
But I'll say as soon as that you can get it to your CPA, and this is the year. There are still people that feel like they can do their own taxes.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the year.
This is a complicated tax year for so many reasons that we've talked about, but also payroll tax credits that some people have been using because, we have seen now more and more team members get COVID and have to stay home, and there are payroll tax credits for that. So all of those come into play. But what I would encourage you to do here at year end is project out your cash flow needs for next year. And part of that includes doing a tax projection. Historically, we've always leaned towards trying to do tax projections before year end. But in this unusual year, actually doing your tax projection in January would make even more sense, as long as you know you're going to meet safe harbor this year. And all that means is paying in a certain amount of taxes by December 31st if you're withholding taxes from your paycheck, or January 15th if you're making estimated tax payments. As long as you've made sure you've met that safe harbor number, you're safe from any interest and penalties if you wait to pay the rest of the taxes that are due by April 15th. And so what that means is you could have your tax projection done by your CPA in January once the whole year is over, because this last fourth quarter is very unpredictable. December is unpredictable because we're starting to see that some states are closing down more than others as far as people being required to stay at home, and so that could change income levels. So in January, you'll know exactly what your income has been for the whole year. Run the numbers then to see how much you owe in taxes by April 15th. So then you can decide, do you want to file your tax return on time, or do you want to just make the tax payment and then wait and file an extension for the return? And then you can budget out the rest of your cash flow needs for the year and do a full cash flow projection. But that's what I would be looking at this time of the year, and looking at what to do in January to make sure you just don't have any tax surprises come April 15th.
Yeah, it's such wise counsel. Thank you. I mean, that's really has been a very unprecedented year for a lot of reasons, but the financial and tax implications for this year have just been mind-boggling.
Mm-hmm.
So there have been many times that I've decided I'm really glad I didn't go into certain careers. Cannot tell you how many times I said, Kate, this year, oh my God, I'm so glad I'm not a CPA.
It has been a whirlwind year for sure. And of course, with tax season being delayed, it was really a non-ending tax season almost for us this year. And we'll see what they do about deadlines for next year. As of right now, I would still plan on April 15th being the date. And, when we are in a situation like this with the new administration and knowing that tax rates will be increasing either in 2021 or it might not be until 2022, that this would be the type of year to purposely file an extension for your tax return, because decisions such as whether to take Section 179
Right.
or your equipment deductions or your equipment purchases, really that decision changes depending on what tax rate you might be in next year. And that's where we know taxes may be higher for some of you. So this would be the kind of year to know what taxes to pay by April 15th, but potentially just have an extension for filing the forms. So some final decisions such as that can be made once we have even more information on what's coming next with taxes.
Yeah, and so I'm one of those people that does file an extension every year. I bet you do too, don't you?
I think there are a lot of reasons to purposely file an extension.
Yeah, I mean, I think this year is probably, and it's funny because the beginning of last year, I was thinking, I think I'll try to have everything done by April. Yeah, so that isn't going to happen. Um, but I do think, the extensions really help you to figure stuff out. And since we're still waiting for IRS guidelines
Right.
and for Congress to do something, and to do, we may be waiting a long time for that, but anyways, but just something to happen, to give us more clarity.
Right.
That would be nice. I mean,
Yeah.
clarity, wouldn't that be nice? It would have been nice. But, in all fairness, just like I didn't want to be a CPA, I'm really glad that I was talked out of going into politics.
Ah,
I
yeah.
had a lot of people trying to talk me into it, and I had a couple of very wise people tell me not to.
Yeah.
And so that's another area I'm really glad I didn't go to. I feel badly for them because it's been a very hard year to be a decision maker,
Mm-hmm.
whatever your business is.
Mm-hmm.
The restaurant owners,
That's
the
right.
dentists themselves, to be a decision maker has been really hard.
Well, and that's the thing is that we weren't able to control these closures that were required of our professions. So that was a big cash flow surprise, but we can control what's happening now about planning for next year and
Right.
planning how much cash you're going to spend and planning what that means as far as how much production and collections you need to be on track for to save certain amounts and to project in advance what's going to happen with your taxes and just be thoughtful about when you're making these decisions. We do have a lot of control there. So I think it's key to get back focused and recentered on the things that you do have control over and to really use that to your advantage as much as possible next year. This can be actually a very exciting time to be planning for the new year.
And the biggest thing that I would say is don't procrastinate.
I agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think typically this time of year we go, oh, it'll wait. We can't do that this year. We can't do that. We need to be very mindful. Well, Kate, thank you so much. As always, we have a good time talking. We always talk tennis. We always talk, all sorts of things. But we always really enjoy each other anyway. But you bring so much to my guest and to the desk, I guess I'd say, and
Well,
to the
thanks,
listeners.
Susan. I
I really
really
appreciate
appreciate it. I always love spending time with you. And I hope everybody has a great end of year here, but especially an exciting first quarter.
it. Amazing. Well, and so I just kind of wanted to wrap that up. Um, I do too. If we ever needed to take a breath during the holiday season, it's now. So much heartache and grief has happened this year. I've had a lot of friends lose parents and relatives this year. It's been weird. Some from COVID, not some others. And I lost a good friend this year, as I mentioned before, as well as many others. I literally threw up Christmas all over my house just a few weeks ago, Thanksgiving week, more than I've done in recent years. It is decked out. There will be no parties. There won't be friends coming by to celebrate holiday cheer and to see how beautiful it looks. It's just me. And it's brought me so much joy to sit at night and to watch the tree lights twinkle. I have felt the peace on earth, which has been a welcomed relief from the stress of this year. I don't know about you, and Kate and I've talked about this, but this year has probably been the most stressful of my life, and most others. It's been hard, not necessarily for what I've walked through, even, but what so many others have had to walk through. My heart has ached for them. And in my head, I always try to figure out how to help. How can I fix this? How can I make it better? This year I've been short of a few answers. It's been hard. This holiday season, I typically gather my $20 bills to put in the Salvation Army Christmas kettles in town. This year, I just made one big donation online, as well as to many other organizations that have felt those in need of food and need of assistance during these very, very strange times. In 1 week, my hometown was on national news 3 different times. One for the massive long food lines, another regarding a family who contracted COVID-19 and someone lost their life, and the end of the week for the tornado that hit less than a mile from my house. Many are in need of help at this time. Please consider giving to your local organization to try to meet those needs. Please, they need help. And if you can give it, please do. There are many other needs that will go unmet. Some need to hear a kind word. Some need a hug. I probably missed that the most. Those that have been on the front line, doctors, nurses, teachers, grocery workers, all essential, need to know how you appreciate them. Even the Amazon delivery people. I put a basket of candy on my porch with a little sign that said, please and thank you. So to wrap up this year, I would love to do what we set out to do when all of this started, to somehow encourage your hearts. You have not been alone this year, nor will you face 2021 alone. We, Kate and I, and a whole slew of others, are here for you as you face 2021 together. If you need help, please reach out. If you need to talk some things through, some ideas you're considering, please reach out. I trust everyone that I've had as a guest on my podcast this year. Kate, Debbie Castagna, Linda Valencia, Jody Catalanello, Kate Carlson, Denise Ciardello, Janice Jansen, Andrea Greer, Virginia Moore, and Teresa Duncan. Each one of these are experts in some area of dental business and can help you not muddle through, but plan for an amazing, successful year, regardless of any crisis thrown at us next year. Well, let me think. Next year, is it time for locusts yet? We don't know. We truly don't know. If I could reach past this microphone and hug each one of you, I would. I am a Southern gal. We hug. Boy, that's changed this year. And I miss them. I miss going to conventions. I miss seeing you, seeing faces, and getting hugs. Most of all, seeing smiles. Sometimes you can see eyes twinkle behind the mask that we have to wear now. But I miss your smiles. My prayer for each one of you is to have whatever you need that warms your heart during the holiday season. Whatever that is. Peace on earth. Take the time to just chill. Be safe. And in January, we will meet again. Take care.
That's a wrap for this podcast of Money In, Money Out. Thanks for listening. Be sure to write down the most valuable tip you learned today so you don't forget it. And remember, you can find out more about all the valuable books and services Susan has to offer at www.susangunsolutions.com.